They say it takes a village to raise a child. I'm Catherine Ryan, and here we draw on my conversations with experts on 9 to Noon to help you navigate family life. The range of early childcare options can be quite overwhelming, so how do you find the right fit for you and for your family? It's a daunting task for parents those who have the choice, if they have the choice, to decide on an early childhood centre, a childminder, a nanny even, or friends and family. If you have a young child, including under 6 months old, what do you need to know and what are the advantages and disadvantages of each option? Associate Dean in the School of Education at Victoria University Wellington, Dr Sue Cherrington, has been involved in early childhood education for more than 40 years, primarily in the kindergarten sector. She's with us from Te Horo. Hi, good to talk to you, Sue.
Good morning, Catherine.
What are all the different forms of childcare available depending on where you live? But what are all the options now?
Okay, well, there's two kind of groups, if you like, of childcare options available for parents. The first is those options that are available under the regulated early childhood sector. So the services have to meet minimum standards that are set by government, and they go through regular Education Review Office reviews, and so on and so forth. So within that sector, there are three main options. The first is a childcare centre, what we call in the sector an education and care setting, and they vary considerably in terms of the philosophies that they have, in terms of the hours that they're open for, and whether they take children aged under 2 or 2 to 5 or a mixed age group from children who may be, well under 6 months through to heading off to school. The second option is a home-based option where your child would go into an educator's home, and so the childcare is provided in that educator's home rather than your own home. And the third option is an in-home situation within your own home, where you may, for example, have a nanny who is employed under a licensed organisation who works with and looks after your child in your own home. So that's the regulated sector. Obviously, outside that regulated sector, there are the other options that parents might use, particularly around family members, grandparents, or other family whānau members who are offering care, and maybe in some informal arrangements with maybe a friend or someone like that, where there are no regulations that are covering the arrangement, and also no government funding that's supporting that childcare arrangement.
Shall we work through them? Let's look perhaps at the in-home care, the likes of Pawson and others. What are some of the factors that makes this an option, for a preferable option for people?
Lots of people, particularly with very young children, quite like that option as a choice because it retains some of that family feel. It's the caregiver or educator who is working with a small group of children, some of whom may be her own or his own, and so there is that sense of family and being located in the community and engaging in the kinds of community or locally based activities that a parent often does with their own child, going to the park, going shopping, those sorts of daily kind of familiar activities that lots of parents do with their own babies and children.
Also, of course, there's not a big group, is it? So that's something you might have in mind, particularly with a younger baby, if you're able to do it.
That's right, and that's one of the things that parents need to be thinking about is what do they feel most comfortable about in terms of the size of the group or the structure that their child would be going into. And some people feel very comfortable with a home-based setting. Other people are more comfortable with a centre-based service. So it's about finding what works for you as the parent.
Are there more hands on deck at a centre? And again, that's something you're weighing up. How many hands on deck? How many children? Do I like the idea of having, perhaps more supervision, or am I really happy and able to have one person I trust at home?
Right, yes, and part of the, I guess one of the pluses and the benefits of going into a centre-based option is that there are a range of adults who are there, and so if children are sometimes challenging as they're developing their social skills, there's always someone else there who's able to support both the child and the other teacher or adult who's working with the child. There is that greater range of children to interact with, and we know a lot in terms of learning that having older children to interact with is helpful for younger children, and vice versa in terms of older children learning about caring for younger children. That's perhaps sometimes more easy depending on the age range in both the centre and the home-based setting.
We're talking about the regulated sector at the moment, and I'm sure that's very much on people's minds. What kind of qualifications are required? Obviously, you'd like to be personally comfortable with anyone who's caring for your child, and particularly in your own home. But is it fairly well overseen, the sector?
Right, so in the childcare space, at least 50% of the staff have to be qualified registered teachers, and that's across the setting. So within an individual centre, there may be slight variations on that. There may be slightly more a higher proportion of qualified teachers in the over two than in the under two, or vice versa. And services are able to get funding for up to 80% qualified. Some services have 100% qualified and registered teachers. In the home-based setting, the home-based educator has a lower level qualification as the minimum. It's sort of around a level 4 or 5 on the framework, so sort of the end of secondary school, first year out of secondary school level qualification. But they are supported by visiting teachers who have to be qualified and registered teachers, early childhood teachers. And nannies, again, tend to have a sort of a level 4 or 5 qualification.
When we come to the childcare or day centre, where obviously there's more of everyone, what are you looking for in terms of a physical environment? If you want to be happy with it, what are the sort of things you're looking for?
I would be looking for an environment where, firstly, children are able to have some kind of agency or degree of control's perhaps not the right word, but where children can be active in that environment. So lots of movable equipment, and it's okay for children to be able to rearrange things and move things. Personally, I really like an environment that's got lots of, particularly in the outdoor environment where there's quite a lot of nature visible, that there are grassed areas and trees and things like that. But again, that's a bit of a personal preference. You're looking for an environment where it's possible for children to work in small groups or spend a little bit of time sometimes on their own or one-on-one with the teacher or teachers, so that it's not everything as a big group. You're not kind of a herd that moves your way through the centre, but there's lots of opportunities for small group and one-on-one interactions and play.
Obviously, practicalities are part of this, the availability, how much someone has to be able to spend for such care. But are you also looking at more personal things if you do have choice, things like temperament, and what are some of the factors that might come into play?
Absolutely, and I think particularly for parents as they move through that transition process, that thinking about what kind of temperament your child has and how that might impact on them settling into the service and being comfortable is quite a positive thing to think about. And if I use my own example, children we tend to be born with a different kind of temperament type. So you have some of those children who are sort of feisty and fearless, and as soon as they're in a new situation, that's kind of, see your mum, see your dad, I'm off, and they take off without barely a backward glance. And at the other end of the scale, you have the slightly slower to warm up children who need to be settled in and who take their time, and once they are settled in, they're fine. And I know certainly in my own situation, my son was a child who needed to have time to settle in and warm up. And once I realised that as a parent, it then took a whole lot of that pressure away in terms of he doesn't settle as quickly as other children, or, and I knew I just needed to build into our routine that at the beginning of the day we took 10 minutes to settle and have a story, do a puzzle together, something like that, so that he was able to make that transition from home into the centre comfortably and very happily.
All right. Some of the questions you should ask, perhaps, if you're going to visit as well, because I imagine the philosophy of the service, to put it in grand terms, but you're wanting to get a sense of their approach.
Yep. So you're wanting to see what the service values in terms of what children are learning in the service, what teachers value, and also the extent to which they want to know what you value as a parent. What's it important for you to have your child learn while they're in an early childhood service? And that can range over a whole range of areas. So it might be that I want my child to learn to get along with other children and to have some, develop good social skills. Or I might be interested long term in my child having developed the literacy and numeracy skills that are going to give him or her a good start off at school. I might be really interested in my child having opportunities to learn and know about his or her culture within the service, as well as learning about other children's cultures and perhaps learning words in other languages, for example. So it's about how am I and what we want for our child, how does that get recognised within the service, alongside what the service values as learning, and some of what is valued as learning is laid out in the early childhood curriculum Te Whāriki, so that's a useful document also for people to look at.
Go ahead, sorry.
It's also around the way in which the program is structured. So are there opportunities for children to engage in long periods of play together? How are routine events woven into the program? And particularly for very young children, routine events such as feeding, changing nappies, settling for sleep are very big parts of their daily lives, and they can be very powerful times for very positive interactions between the adult and the child, or they can be something that's more rushed and it's kind of factory line-ish. So you're wanting to know, how does the service use those routine times as warm, caring moments and interactions between adults and teachers, because that will say a lot around the approach that the service has to interacting with children.
I imagine this is close to how the centre communicates with you as well.
Exactly. And particularly with very young children, where they're what happens in a day can have a big impact. So, if they haven't slept well, if they haven't eaten very much lunch, or haven't had much of their bottle, then, that's going to have an impact when mum and dad take them home at the end of the day. So, what are the systems that they have for communicating about those daily events with you? But in the sort of longer term, bigger picture, what are the systems and approaches that they have for sharing what your child is doing at the centre and what they've been learning in the service? And how are they managing those sorts of things? What kind of relationship do they want to have with the parents and families of the children who are in the service? So, do they make it easy for breastfeeding mothers, for instance, to come into the service and to breastfeed if that's possible, or to express milk and have that available for the child during the day? So, that stuff around developing a partnership with parents is also really important.
Lots and lots of questions, and you're quite entitled to ask them. Things like, do you have to pay if your child's sick or away?
Absolutely.
And what do you do with first aid and issues? And the obvious one to start with is your centre licensed, and ask about qualifications, and you should be quite, polite, but quite entitled to ask all these questions. There's another matter, flexibility too, especially if you're someone who's not necessarily, you might yourself sometimes find yourself asked to do extra at work or whatever. Is that another consideration? Flexibility of ours, and is it very often available that you can be flexible like that?
Right. I think it's certainly something to have the conversation about. It's possibly something that is a little bit easier for for home-based services, whether it's in your own home or in the educator's home, to perhaps be able to manage, because you're not juggling when staff are coming on duty and going off, and other children who might, the numbers of other children who might be enrolled. But certainly one of the questions to ask is, if I'm starting work 2 days a week and then in 6 months' time I want to move to 3 days a week or to full-time, is that going to be possible? Because you don't want to be in a situation where you then can't be flexible in terms of either increasing or reducing your working hours without having to then also perhaps move the service that your child attends.
Let's look at the home-based care. If you do have that option of a childminder who might be a relative or someone you know, are there still some rules that do have to be met?
If it's outside the regulated sector, then as far as I know, there aren't rules that have to be met. So the things you would want to sort of know about, I guess, is I'd want somebody who had done a first aid certificate relatively recently, because young children are very good at putting things in their mouth and choking and those sorts
other
of
places.
Things. Yes, exactly. And I guess that's one of the things around when you use somebody who's not part of the regulated service, and perhaps who's not a family member, then do you know who else is coming in and out of the home with them? Are there part of the regulated service sector means that people working with children have undergone police checks. In the home-based regulated sector, it's not only the caregivers, but it's anybody else who's living in the home who's had to undergo that police check. So you've got kind of a safety layer there. So it's probably not particularly easy to ask a friend, have they had a police check, or would they be willing to have a police check? But it's those sorts of things that you probably want to be thinking through.
And things like safety and fencing, and whether there's pools, any hazards, and whether they're covered off. And in your own home?
Same sorts of things, I think, because you want to know that the person who's coming into your home will know what to do if a first aid situation arises. And I think if it was somebody coming into my home, I probably would want to have them have a police check.
Yeah. Another matter, of course, is to blend different options, and you might be using family and whānau in combination with some centre-based care. Does that double the trouble, or can it be a really good solution?
It probably depends to a certain extent on the situation. I think quite often people, particularly with very young children, like to have the slower pace, if you like, of having some family member, whether it's grandparents or aunts or uncles, looking after the child for part of that time, so that they're, particularly if they're feeling that a whole week in an early childhood service is too much, that having a couple of days that feel very much like home can be nice. The other thing that I think is really important, though, that parents think about is, what is my plan B, C, and D? So, I'm back at work. My child's well settled in the early childhood service, whichever sort I've chosen, and then my child gets sick and can't go back to the centre for 3 days or 5 days. There's only so much annual leave I have, or sick leave. So what arrangements can I have in place to kind of pick up those situations? And unfortunately, when children do start moving and having greater contact with other children, often in the early days they do pick up more bugs, just because they're young, but they do end up building up very good immunity.
We've got to go through that phase, haven't you? Yeah. Just to look on the positive side.
Yes.
Hey, just one person questioning the issue, if we heard you correctly, of home-based educators needing a minimum level 4 qualification. This person's saying they don't require a qualification at the moment, and it's being addressed by an upcoming ministry review of home-based education. Did we hear you correctly?
Well, they may have got a better handle on that one. I thought that they did require a lower level qualification.
Well, it's interesting just to be aware of, and especially if it's under review. Yeah. Just finally, with Play Centre, this is different again, and the philosophy has been parents being active and being involved. Do you need to be aware of the fact it's not childcare as such.
Yeah, so Play Centre is built around parents delivering the, and running the Play Centre and delivering the program and being deeply involved in the program. So it's probably more of an option for parents where they're working part-time and can still be involved, 2 or 3 days a week in the Play Centre, or parents who are having a longer period of time at home. Play Centre predominantly has children starting at the age of 2, although there are some Play Centres that are sort of running short sessions where parents with infants can bring them along for a while, but as the more kind of structured program, it's usually from 2.
Staying with age, I think you can be no younger than 6 weeks to go into daycare, and some would say some centres will specify 3 months. Is that correct?
They will.
Yeah.
So centres will set their own sort of younger stage. And it would be very, very rare for any babies under the age of 6 weeks.
So I really appreciate it. Just one question that's come in, and we like to encourage questions, so if you wouldn't mind addressing it, I don't know if you can answer it. It's someone asking about a kindy that's used time out as a tool with their 3-year-old, saying she was put in an office for 3 minutes because she hit the teacher. And they're going to be taking it up. They weren't told about it directly, they're saying. They're going to be taking it up when they come back from being away. Do you have a comment?
Yes, I think it would be really good for them to go and have the conversation with the teachers about what happened, and if they're not comfortable about the response, to then go to the association level. The regulations are very clear that children cannot be isolated. So what I don't know is whether there was an adult in the office with the child.
Interesting, yeah.
So if there was an adult there and the teachers have felt that the child was kind of overwrought, and sometimes young children find it very difficult to kind of calm back down if they have got very upset. If the teacher had taken the child into that quieter space to kind of give some space to breathe and calm down, then that would be I can see there's an appropriateness in terms of how they've responded there, but children shouldn't be isolated.
Thank you, Sue. I hope we'll talk again. Thank you, Dr Sue Cherrington.